So guess what? They've decided to ban Russian and Belarusian players, tennis players, from competing at Wimbledon. Now, again, Wimbledon is basically the most prestigious tennis championship. It's the best of the best. It's the top of the top. It takes place in England. And let me show you this headline from BBC Sport. Right, so they say Russian and Belarusian players banned from tournament, and this news was broken just a few hours ago. And of course, why? Because of the invasion of Ukraine. I guess the tennis players they rolled into Ukraine in tanks that they have to be banned like this. I guess that's the logic. Men's world number 2, Daniil Medvedev of Russia, and women's world number 4, Ariana Sabalenka of Belarus are the highest ranked players to be affected, and the players are also banned from any of the UK grass court tournaments. Okay, so all in all, if we look at forget the juniors, just the top ranking players, there's about 20 players that have been banned minimum, right? And I think even if it was one player or two players, it's the principle, right? Which is quite concerning. This is ironic because originally they were basically telling Russian and Belarusian players that you can compete at Wimbledon, but you have to denounce Putin. This is the condition, right? There's like some ideological purity test, right? Show us that you're not you're not serving for the Kremlin. No pun intended. Okay, so this is true. I'm not making this up. They actually told them this. This is not a joke. Here, look. This is from a few weeks ago. This is on March 16th. They said the British government wants Medvedev, so again, we just talked about him, to denounce Putin to avoid Wimbledon ban. And now they've changed their minds. They don't care if you've denounced Putin. Some of them have. You're still going to get banned. Just for being Russian. Doesn't matter if you live in Russia. It doesn't matter that you don't live in Russia. Many of these players, again, they are moving from one country, from one tournament to the next, sometimes within weeks of each other. So, they usually don't necessarily live in Russia, whatever that means anyway. My point is that there's no connection here whatsoever to the Kremlin. They're not competing as Team Russia. They're competing individually, and they're still banning them. I mean, I don't know what to call this. This is really... Hysteria is a good word. Don't you agree? And of course, Time Magazine, do you know what headline they put out? They say Wimbledon's decision to ban Russian and Belarusian players is a good idea. Wow, surprise, surprise. The mainstream media are cheering this on. Why wouldn't they? Why shouldn't they? That's their job. It's to sell you this kind of stuff, right? So there is one, I guess you could say, sensible, voice of reason that we could look at. And this is from SI.com. And you can see the headline says, Wimbledon's decision to ban Russian and Belarusian players is indefensible. Indefensible. So that's in stark contrast to what I just showed you from Time. Right? So as we were saying, most directly and immediately, this ban will impact dozens of players. Okay? Using today's rankings, more than 20 singles eligible players have been banned, far more in doubles and juniors. Again, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I understand anything about tennis. I'm just trying to give you an idea of the quantity, of the scale of this, right? So I think that this is a very good point over here. So what then of players from a country that, say, executes a genocide against a Muslim minority or carries out other human rights abuses that Wimbledon deems offensive, or players of one sovereign country that invades another sovereign country on bogus grounds of seeking weapons of mass destruction? So that's very clearly a reference to Iraq. You're in 2003, the United States and the UK, they accused Iraq of having weapons of mass destruction. It was a lie, and they invaded a sovereign country. It's called a crime of aggression. Because it's not founded on self-defense, it's aggression. So this is a good question, right? If you're going to ban Russian tennis players for what their government is doing, then it stands to reason that you should be banning, I guess, British and American tennis players and football players and, what have you, from international competitions, right? That logically, since you want this, this collective punishment, you want to indict all Russian citizens. And again, this reminds me of something we saw a few weeks ago. You had in Canada, they grounded a plane because 2 Russians were on board. Not Russian government officials, which again, that would also be illegal. You're not allowed to just randomly arrest diplomats because you feel like it. That violates the Vienna Convention. But just 2 Russian nationals. That's it. Like, they're not suspected of a crime. They're just Russian. So this is leading us down a bad road, I would say, putting it mildly, right? I've seen comments on Twitter recalling the treatment of Japanese during World War II, right? So for those of you who don't know, in the United States, you have a lot of Japanese immigrants, and when World War II broke out, they set up these internment camps, and they basically treated everyone who's Japanese like crap, basically accusing them of dual loyalty and so on. Now, I guess this is a tiny bit different in the sense that this is about a sporting competition, right? And these Russian athletes, they don't necessarily live in the UK anyway, so it's something to do. It's not 100% comparable, but still, it's the idea that we're going to punish ordinary citizens, just random nationals, because we don't like what their government is doing. Wow. What happens then to British and American nationals? We're screwed. We should be banned from every country on earth then, according to this logic. And I want to show you another bit of hypocrisy. Okay, this is because again, this is to do with sport, and I wanted to raise this before, but I didn't have an occasion to do so. I will now. For those of you who watch football, so I know most of my audience are Americans, so for you that's soccer. The body that governs football, the big one is FIFA, right? And they've always had a ban on political messages. So, for example, if you came with a Palestinian flag to a football match, you would get fined, or rather, the team that you're supporting would get fined. Okay, especially if the players show that, right? So I mean that's really the biggest offense. How dare you bring a Palestinian flag? And there have been cases where football teams have been fined because they were sporting Palestinian flags. And the same thing goes with Barcelona. And my point here is that this completely changed in the last 2 months because of Ukraine. I'm trying to encapsulate how outrageous this is, what a stark contrast it is, because they basically went from no political symbols allowed, no flags, to Ukrainian flags are okay, and not only that, we're going to put Ukrainian flags on the football pitch. So, on a football pitch, you have 4 corners, right? And each corner has a flag. The flags are usually red, orange. They look like this. Here, you can see that's usually what they look like up here. They literally put a Ukrainian flag on each corner. And again, this is a match between Bayern München and Salzburg, right? So, I mean, this is a huge contrast. You can understand the how crazy this is. And I hate to read from the Sun, but it doesn't matter. The point still stands. Let me just show you this. So they're talking about the contrast as well, okay? And so Celtic fans were fined twice by UEFA, which is the basically like FIFA but for Europe, right? So they govern the Champions League and so on. Celtic fans were fined twice for displaying Palestinian flags in Champions League matches. Okay, so £16,000 for a flag display at Murrayfield Champions League qualifier in 2014, and then an £8,619 fine from UEFA in September for displaying hundreds of Palestinian flags. And then, of course, Barcelona also found themselves in hot water with UEFA for displaying the Catalan flag in Champions League matches, okay? So there's a clear precedent where they've actually fined people, they punished them for, political messages, basically, right? Now they're putting Ukrainian flags on the pitch. This is incredible. It's really incredible. The hypocrisy, the bias is astounding. And you don't need to understand football to grasp what I'm telling you. You don't need to understand tennis to see that this is some huge BS, right? This is some huge BS. And I'm wondering, I'm asking myself, where does this come from? Why do they hate Russians so much? It has nothing to do with Ukraine. There's something else going on here. Because again, they're not sanctioning government officials, which actually again punishes ordinary Russians. But just on paper, they're not going after the Kremlin or people who work in the Russian government or the military. They're just targeting random Russians. And in sports, where they always tell us, no politics allowed, stop talking about Palestine. You're not allowed to speak about Palestine. We don't allow politics in sports. We want to keep that separate, right? We're secular. And now it's like, oh, we're going to go balls to the wall. We are so biased, we're not even going to let a Russian come here. Get out. No bears allowed. It's crazy, right? It's crazy. And I couldn't help but think of this video from a few days ago that was going viral on the internet. I guess I should have put it in a separate segment, but I'll show it to you anyway, because I feel like this is the underlying sentiment that's driving this Russophobia, right? This deep-seated hatred of Russians. That, oh, well, they are white, but they're not like us. They're not westernized, right? They're otherly. They're not civilized. They don't have the same values as us, right? That's what they're saying. And if you don't believe me, take a look at this clip. This is Florence Gaub, and she was on German television, right? On ZDF, which is, I mean, this is a huge channel in Germany, right? It's one of the biggest. And she's just listen to what she's saying. Honestly, it's shocking.
Ich glaube, wir dürfen nicht vergessen, dass auch wenn Russen
Oh, bloody hell. I played you the clip without the German subtitles. I understand it, but I don't think you guys will. Give me a moment. I'll just look this up. Hold on a second. There we go.
Ich glaube, wir dürfen nicht vergessen, dass auch wenn Russen europäisch aussehen, dass es keine Europäer sind, jetzt im kulturellen Sinne, einen anderen Bezug zu Gewalt haben, einen anderen Bezug zu Tod haben.
Leidensfähiger sind, oder was meinen Sie?
Naja, es gibt da nicht diesen liberalen, postmodernen Zugang zum Leben, das Leben als ein Projekt, was jeder für sich individuell gestaltet, sondern das Leben kann halt einfach auch mit dem Tod recht früh enden. Ich meine, Russland hat zum Beispiel auch eine relativ niedrige Lebenserwartung, ich glaube 70 für Männer. Das ist halt einfach, dann geht man einfach anders damit um, dass da Menschen sterben. Ne? Ich glaube...
Even the host was like, yeah, you just, you really went super Nazi with that, didn't you? She really, I think encapsulated this sentiment that's driving all this Russian hatred. Basically that, Russians, they don't have the same values as us. They don't value life. What does that even mean? Like they're animals or something? They're barbarians? What are you trying to say? Shocking, right? It's shocking, but I really think that she basically said the quiet part out loud, and she's saying what a lot of people are thinking in the West. What's driving these decisions? Like, let's just go after random Russian people who could actually be against, what their country's doing. Once again, let me just remind you, Wimbledon had said if Belarusian and Russian players want to come and compete, they must denounce Putin first. And even those that have done it are still being banned. So, they keep raising this bar, this purity test, and it just never stops. This is the big defect with this kind of thinking, with this kind of cancel culture rubbish. It's never enough. It's never enough. And I think if they were doing this to Americans or to people from the UK, to Britons, I think they would be outraged, right? They would be outraged. But it's okay, apparently, when you do it to Russians and Belarusians. Here, I want to show you Djokovic. We were talking about him. You remember when he tried to go to Australia? He's called this Wimbledon ban of Russian and Belarusian players. He's called it crazy, okay? And let me just scroll down over here. Give me a second. So Novak Djokovic, who's the current men's #1 in the world, believes the decision is a mistake. He's born in Serbia, and he was 11 when NATO bombed Yugoslavia. He said that, quote, "I know how much emotional trauma it leaves in Serbia. We all know what happened in 1999. In the Balkans, we've had many wars in recent history. However, I cannot support the decision of Wimbledon. I think it's crazy. When politics interferes with sport, the result is not good." And I'm not going to go into the whole thing that happened with him. I've done separate videos on that, so please feel free to right here on the channel. I think it was a good opportunity to highlight the offshore detention centers for migrants in Australia, which is where, they basically took him to the medevac one. In any case, you got to love the hypocrisy, right? No, we don't want politics in sports unless it suits us. Very, very funny. You're very funny.